All right, this is dialogue writing part 2. If you haven't watched the part 1 video yet, then you should definitely go check that out right now. But this is part 2, and we're filling out this note sheet. It's color coded, and we're talking about the conventions, the grammar, and the, today, advanced skills of writing good dialogue in our stories. So just as a very, very quick review, we started with conventions and we talked about how good dialogue should be in quotation marks, and typically it contains a speech verb and a speaker. So John said, comma, space, quotation mark, fill in the blank with what John said, period, quotation mark. The thing you never, ever, ever want to do is let your narrator speak for your character. As you can see in this example, this is not Daniel said, then saying it. It's Daniel then told Peggy that he didn't think this. This is just much, much weaker and robs your story of character development. The second thing that we talked about was grammar. I want inside the quotation marks, I want a capital first letter all the time, and I want ending punctuation. It's either going to be a period if it's at the very end of the sentence, or it'll be a comma, quotation mark, space, said John, period, something like that. The grammatical rules for dialogue, I'm not going to like just spend hours and hours on. I'm just more going to expect that you know how to do it, and if you're unsure how to do it, you look it up, because this should be reviewed from at some point in your formal academic career. So outside the quotes, you have your character says combo, comma, space, quote, or your quote ending or you have your ending punctuation, quote, space, said character. Yep. Character speech combos you should use to create tone. And then when we get to the paragraph level grammar for dialogue, you always need a new paragraph when you have a new speaker. That's just not even a suggestion, it's a rule. You make paragraphs whenever a new character speaks or before that new character speaks. So you'll have a lot more paragraphs in creative writing because of this, right? So here's my example. This is properly done. We have some narration and dialogue, but then anytime I switch to a new character speaking, it's a new paragraph. So this sentence ends up being this paragraph is one sentence long, and that is correct because Peggy's speaking here, Peggy's speaking here, Daniel's speaking here. So yeah, you always need one paragraph given per dialogue. Yeah, this would not be good. You have two speakers in here. Now we're on to our new content, part 3. And this is going to be what I just call advanced techniques. Okay? This is a few rule breaks, right? I gave you the rules above. Now we're going to break a few of them. And they're not actually breaking the rules. I guess I'm just more adding nuance. Okay? So good writers know these rules and they follow them, but they also know here's some strategies to kind of make your dialogue read a bit more smoothly. So the first thing that you can do is you can skip the character says combination, right? The speaker plus speech verb combo during a lengthy 2-character conversation. Let me highlight the letter or the word 2. The letter 2. The word 2. If you have 3 characters, it's really hard to do this. But what I'm telling you to do is if you have 2 characters and they're going back and forth, by using your quotation marks correctly and doing a new paragraph whenever there's a new speaker, you are essentially indicating this is the speaker now, this is the speaker now, this is the speaker now. So you don't have to keep saying, John said, Jane said, Daniel said, Peggy replied, right? You just go do, 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 do with just the dialogue. You still have your quotation marks and your ending punctuation, but you're avoiding the very old and repetitive, just constant repetition of character said, character replied. You're getting rid of that speech verb and speaker combo, just going with the dialogue, okay? And if you have a character says construction, if you do have one, consider adding an action rather than repeating said or the word like said, right? So again, because the paragraphing tells me you have a new character, I know that like if the only two characters are Jane and John, and Jane said ... the next line of dialogue on a new paragraph will be John. You don't need to always say John said. So that's why rule number 1 is you can just skip the John said. Rule number 2 is you can just say John turned away. Line of dialogue, right? So the quotation marks and character name, like I said, if the character is clear, create an action. Give the character a different action. This also increases the imagery. Okay. Now, I'm not sure if I'm making sense, so let me write an example in here. Here, let me just give you an example of this rule. So I've got a new paragraph. Jane then told John, I think we're through. I knew this was coming. John turned away. Right? So this is an example of what I'm talking about. Jane then told John, I think we're through. This is classic dialogue. We have Jane told John, comma, space, quotes, period, end quotes. I'm going to have a new speaker, so I have a new paragraph. You can see my space right here. New paragraph. I go right into my dialogue, and you know, the only two characters in the story are Jane and John. So I don't need to say, John replied, I knew this was coming. I knew this was coming, comma, quote, space. John turned away. This is an action, not a speech verb. Because I know it's John saying it, you don't need John said and turned away. This is always weaker. This is bad. This is good. John turned away, right? You could also just do this. I knew this was coming. And then later on in your story, have the action component, right? So there's my example. I think hopefully that helps y'all get the idea here. All right, finally, advanced tip number 3. Make the dialogue authentic, y'all. Make it authentic. People typically don't talk. Listen to me right now. I'm just talking in circles and I just repeated myself. People don't talk. We don't talk linearly. We don't talk perfectly. We don't talk in formal academic English. So in order to make your dialogue authentic, you're going to have to listen to people and try to emulate it. Okay? Dialogue is speech from people. It's not narrated, right? Part of the reason why narrated dialogue is so weak is because it takes away the ability to make that dialogue authentic to a character. So sometimes we don't speak, or sometimes we speak in a circular or arrhythmic, I don't even know if I can spell that word on the first try. Yeah, I got it. Manner, right? Sometimes people speak in circles and they repeat themselves, or they don't repeat themselves and they should repeat themselves, or sometimes people are jumping around in what they say, right? Just think about this. Like when you're talking to someone, what that person says to you and how you reply is not just based on the speech that you're having. It's based off of the body language you're having. It's based off of previous conversations and assumptions. And there's all this stuff going on anytime we have a conversation with one another. And therefore, we don't just linearly speak, reply, and formal academic sentences that make perfect sense. Sometimes it doesn't make perfect sense. Sometimes there's quirks, right? I say right all the time. That is a quirk, right? Huh? I just did it on accident. All right, let's keep going. Sometimes people speak indirectly, as if they're thinking about something without saying it blatantly. People speak without saying things honestly, right? So sometimes you have to make your dialogue have assumptions built into it. Again, we're trying to make our dialogue authentic, and people are speakers, not characters that are invented and perfect grammar, all that, right? You can skip the ums and likes, right? If you're going to listen to someone speak, you'll hear ums and likes all the time. You don't need those, though. You never need the ums and likes. So let me just give you an amazing example of what I would call authentic dialogue. Ernest Hemingway, obviously one of the greatest writers of all time, especially within the last 100 years. And this is a story called Hills Like White Elephants. It's probably the most famous dialogue ever written. The story is pretty much nothing but dialogue. It has some narration, as you can see, but it is mainly dialogue. And I think the reason why it's so good is because really the only thing we get about the characters is their dialogue. We don't really get a whole lot else added to this story. We just get the dialogue, and we start to realize there's a really interesting story going on within the dialogue that's separate from the narration, and we have to do the work to figure out what's going on between the girl and the man. So here's the excerpt. "What should we drink?" the girl asked. She had taken off her hat and put it on the table. Okay, the man could reply, "I don't know, what do you want?" Or, "Oh, I would like a martini," or whatever, right? But that's not how people actually speak. So the girl says, "What should we drink?" And the man says, "It's pretty hot." Right? This is the example of having not perfect, "What should we drink?" "I'd like a Coke." Okay. Like, no, what should we drink? It's pretty hot. Like, I'm observing something from the world, and I'm informing you, whatever you get, it should be cold, because it's hot out. So, sorry, every line we could analyze. "What should we drink?" the girl asked. She had taken off her hat and put it on the table. "It's pretty hot," the man said. "Let's drink beer." "Dos cervezas," the man said into the curtain. "Big ones?" a woman asked from the doorway. "Yes, 2 big ones." The woman brought 2 glasses of beer and 2 felt pads. She put the felt pads and the beer glasses on the table and looked at the man and the girl. The girl was looking off at the line, I typed it wrong, of hills. They were white in the sun, and the country was brown and dry. "They look like a white elephant," she said. She's just dozing off and looking, and makes this fanciful comment. The hills look like white elephants. And the man says, "I've never seen one." "How do you know they look like white? I've never seen one." She said, "No, you wouldn't have." "I might have," the man said. "Just because you say I wouldn't have doesn't prove anything." So the man's starting to get into a conflict. She's like, "They look like white elephants." And he's like, "I've never seen one." She's like, "No, you haven't." "How do you know I haven't? That doesn't prove anything." And the girl just changed the subject. "They painted something on it." "What does it say?" "Anis del Toro. It's a drink." She just totally changes the subject in the middle of the sentence, or in the middle of the dialogue, right? He's trying to kind of argue, and she's just not having it. "They look like white elephants." "I've never seen one." "No, you wouldn't have." "I might have. That doesn't prove anything." Then she looks at the bead curtain. "They painted something on that." Okay, this girl is just an amazing character. She is, in my opinion, there's so much to her. And all I gave you is literally the shortest piece of text from this story. This is a whole story. It's a great story. You should check it out. But this girl has a lot going on in her head. And she's drifting off again and again and observing things and noticing them. But she's not about to argue with this guy. This guy seems to want to argue, and she's just not about to have it. And they're drinking, and the girl says that she wants beer, and the man says he wants big beers. So this is the development of characters. There's something going on in this conversation between the girl and the man. There's something going on here. He's looking for conflict. She's trying to avoid it. Why? And that's what the story's about. Just from dialogue. They are skirting around the story entirely. And it's so well done because that's how people actually talk. You can see our mechanics too. We skip the speech verb here, right? We know it has to be the girl because the girl said, the man said, and then the girl would be this one just from the paragraphing, right? We also see there are times when I've never seen one, the man drank his beer. That's technique number 2, right? This is I've never seen one. The man said and drank his beer. No. We know it's the man, and Hemingway just gives us action. And then finally, it's authentic. Like I said, it's circular, it's arrhythmic, it's bouncing around, it's indirect, there's assumptions. There's a lot more going on than just this linear I said, they said, and this is what happened next. Like, it's very, very authentic dialogue. So I feel like even in just this excerpt, you can see all 3 of these advanced techniques so quickly. Okay, y'all. That's the lesson. Let me tell you about your assignment real quick. Here on Moodle, I'll have dialogue notes video part 2 in addition to part 1. And your assignment, well, the dialogue notes is just what you're doing right now. It's just take the notes. But the assignment is due next Wednesday. We don't have class on Monday technically, so I'm giving you till Wednesday at 2 p.m. to do this. And it is a practice write. Practice writes have been pretty easy so far, and this one's going to get a little bit harder. I'm starting to grade harder. Just so y'all know, full transparency, I start off easy, and as I introduce writing skills, I also increase my expectations for your work. So as you're practicing and as you're doing this stuff, just know like the bar is higher. So here's what you have to do. We spent a lot of time reviewing dialogue. We've talked about how dialogue creates tone and character development, story movement, and more. So we need to practice it. So here's what you're going to do. For this assignment, you can only write with dialogue. You are not allowed to narrate. You can use the character says combinations to introduce your character's names and to create tone. So you can have John said, or John rebuked, or John admonished, or John spoke angrily. You can use some adverbs in there. But that's it. I want everything else to be dialogue. Everything must be dialogue. But I don't just want a conversation. I want some type of plot that you create through dialogue. So you will naturally create tone. You will naturally create character development because you're using dialogue. But I want you to add a plot as well. So here's how you're going to be graded. I want perfect conventions. I want the correct use of grammar. I want intentional use of speaker speech verbs to adjust the tone. I want a plot that has a conflict and a storyline. And I want interesting characters. All just with dialogue. You can do all of it. And I'm thinking 500 plus words is what you're going to need to do this. And it's going to be due Wednesday before the start of class. Wednesday is 2/21. February 21st, 2 p.m. is your due date. Okay, y'all, that's your assignment. Let me know if you need any help or if I can give you any assistance. Happy to help however I can, and get to work. See ya.